two streaming movies, Jackpot 2024 on Amazon Prime and Incoming 2024 on Netflix. These two movies were released maybe about 1 week apart from each other, and they essentially are quintessential streaming movies in that there is no particular substance to them. It is hard to imagine they would survive in a cinema because there's no real compelling reason why anyone should really watch these films. They are perfectly enjoyable as a movie that turns up from out of nowhere on streaming. You notice it and you go, oh, no harm in it, why not? And you watch it and you enjoy it at the time, and a week, 2 weeks later, you have, for the most part, mostly forgotten about them, and in a year or two, it will have probably faded away to very little memory. Anyway, both movies, whatever qualities they have, and they were both perfectly decent, whatever qualities they had, they were surface level. The enjoyment is there, immediate, on the surface. You watch it, you get whatever there is to get out of it in one viewing. The need for repeat viewings is not very strong. Not that it will do any harm. It will, I assume, both movies be very enjoyable. As they were on first viewing, they should be pretty much as enjoyable on second viewing. Of the two movies, Jackpot was definitely the better movie. It's by Paul Feig, who did Bridesmaids, and it's... I listened to a podcast in which he was interviewed, and he described it as being influenced mostly by Jackie Chan, the action that he was doing in the 80s, where it was as much a comedy as it was an action, and the incompetence of the lead character was half of the joke. The movie also benefits greatly from having John Cena, who, I don't know about anyone else's opinion, but I find him to be a very funny and compelling screen presence. I am always happy to see John Cena in a movie. So I'm actually quite a bit of a John Cena fan. Anyway, Jackpot was enjoyable, but very insubstantial, and the action was good but not overly impressive. There's nothing to make you go, oh wow, that was amazing. I mean, Spy by Paul Feig, which I think is 2013, or maybe 2015, it has more spectacular action. It clearly has the bigger budget. Whereas Jackpot, you can, because it has that visual look of being a streaming movie, and it has a slightly digital video look to it, but instead of the 35mm film look. So you can, and also it was filmed in Georgia. They even make a joke about, oh, the streets of LA look an awful lot like Georgia. It's not a big budget looking movie. The action and stuff obviously cost a whole bunch of money to do, but you don't look at the movie and think to yourself, yes, they had a massive budget to play with. You can tell it was a fairly modest production. I enjoyed it. It was funny, it was entertaining, it worked, but it was completely insubstantial. So I would give Jackpot 7 out of 10. Certainly well worth a watch. If you have Amazon Prime, there's really no reason not to watch it. Then, I think 1 week later, Incoming was released on Netflix, which is a standard issue teen comedy. The type of thing we don't really do anymore. You know, the American Pie genre is what it is connected to. It was fine, it was okay, perfectly watchable, fairly entertaining. I had no real issues with it, but the script is poorly structured. I say that because it sets up a storyline. You know, it sets up there's going to be a big party and these kids want to, you know, be cool and do blah blah blah. So it sets up a story, but then doesn't really do a lot with that story. The characters splinter off into their separate subplots, and their separate subplots, some of which are geographically in the same house but different places in the house, or in the case of two of the characters who take a car out for a bit of a joyride, they are geographically dislocated from the other characters. But anyway, these characters splinter off into their own subplots, and those subplots don't interact with each other. What happens in subplot A has nothing to do with what happens in subplot B. So you could cut out entire characters, or you could delete whole entire plot lines, and it would not affect the overall story at all. If you can delete material to that extent, then that is a good sign that the structure is weak. I think a really good example of this is a movie called Postgraduate or Postgrad, I think from 2009, in which it's just a bunch of random scenes. You could cut out any random storylines from that and it would have had no impact on the story. So anyway, Incoming was very bitty as a story. A bunch of subplots that barely connect at all. It just intercuts between these different subplots. They don't really connect together, they don't add up to anything. And the whole movie doesn't really come to much of a conclusion. It's a rather underwhelming ending where nothing much is really concluded, nothing much is really advanced in a particularly satisfying way. But the movie's surface joys and entertainments work. The movie is perfectly fine. Again, it's on Netflix. If you already have a subscription, there's really no reason not to watch it if you have an inclination towards liking American Pie style movies. And it has a wee bit of gross out content, but very minimal, just a small amount. It's certainly no masterpiece, and again, it deserves its place on streaming rather than being released into a cinema or whatever. If this was released as a straight to video on demand type movie, I doubt it would achieve much popularity because there's no particular reason why anyone should care about it. But it turns up on Netflix. It's there at no extra cost, so why not? I would give Incoming 5 out of 10.